This week's video is brought to you by Mephiston Red. Hi everyone, welcome to this week's tutorial. This week we're going to be painting red power armor. So you can use this across any red Space Marines that you want, any different chapter. You can make your own chapter using red Space Marines, but this is ideal for Blood Angels. So the Blood Angels are getting some new rules now as well, so I thought this would be a great time for me to show you guys how I go about painting red power armor, or this is how I would paint a Blood Angel. So what we're going to do is we're going to start our Blood Angel from a black undercoat. I found personally using a black undercoat best for Blood Angels. I've tried different undercoats. You can use white, you can use grey. It'll give you a very different finish. I prefer black. The black undercoat goes on smoothly as well, and there's lots of other areas on the Space Marine that need to be re-undercoated black if you use a different undercoat, and there are areas on Blood Angels which are already black as well, which you can leave if you want to, but I just find personally I prefer the black undercoat. So we're going to go over black undercoat, and it's more difficult to go over a black undercoat as well, so we always prefer to show the hard way, because then you can work it back from anything else. So you could, if you wanted to, use a black undercoat and then airbrush your base coat red on, or you could use the Mephiston Red spray to spray that red base coat on if you want. We always prefer to use brush technique here because it's most accessible for everyone. So what I'm going to do is, the first thing, this is what I've always done in all of the Space Marine tutorials, and that's to get the base coat down. So first I'm using Mephiston Red, obviously. So this is the main colour of the Space Marine we want. This is a great colour, it's one of my favourite colours. So I'm just thinning this with a little bit of water. So we want it to flow nice and smooth, and I'm just going to show you guys, as I have done with my other Space Marine tutorials, just on a part of the Space Marine. I don't have time to do the full Marine. So moving the brush really quickly, so keeping the paint thin, moving the brush fast. That's the secret to get a smooth base coat. Thin and fast, going over the whole area. Now don't worry if it's streaky or messy to begin with, because once it's dry we'll do another coat and it'll become a nice solid colour. So it'll probably take about 3 coats, but it'll be worth it to get a nice smooth base coat over this red. So much as what we've done in our other tutorials for Space Marines, just getting the base coat on there first. And the base coat should normally be the flat colour that you want the Space Marine to be. So in this case it's this nice strong Mephiston Red. So I'm going to do a couple of coats of this. Well, I'm going to let this dry, do another coat, let it dry, do another coat, and then come back, and then we'll do some shading. So I'm back in a second. Okay, we've got a nice smooth base coat now, Mephiston Red there. It took about 4 coats. So keep your brush moving fast, keep your paint thin, keep going over. You'll get there in the end, you'll get a nice solid base coat. So the method we're going to show today is probably something you probably use more for characters or display pieces rather than gaming pieces. You can apply this to gaming pieces if you want, but you might want to simplify the method a little bit by missing out some stages, or just using some simple edge highlighting rather than the blending. But I thought we'd show you the slightly more complex method, the method that you're probably a bit more involved. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of shading first before I start doing some highlighting. So I'm just going to thin down some corn red on the palette. So probably making this into wash consistency. And then I'm just going to start dropping that into the recesses. You don't have to be really neat with this first shade. Corn red isn't that much darker in tone than Mephiston Red, so really just going to start working down the shades. You can see the consistency there. I'll show you on my, so it's that consistency. Sorry, I can't show you the palette, guys, in the shot. The camera tries to focus on it, so we'll just carry on. You can see I'm being quite loose with this first shade. Don't have to be really accurate. And the first thing I'm doing is I'm just dropping it directly into the recesses, because I know that's where it's going to go. And once it's dry, you can see where it is. It dries a little bit darker. And what I'll do is, once I've gone into all those panel lines, which are these lines here, I'll shade into all of those. I'll come back and I'll show you what I'll do next with the same colour. So I'm just going to do these panel lines first. I'm back in a second. Okay, so I put a bit of corn red into the deepest recesses to begin with. You can't really see much difference, but it is there, and it's going to help layer over those further shades in a bit. But just keeping that corn red quite thin, and I'm making that into a glaze. So when you make paint into a glaze, just send it to a wash consistency. That's all you've got to do. So you can see there on the thumb there, it's quite thin. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to shade down, pulling the brush towards the bottom of the greave there, just to give this armour panel some depth rather than it just being flat red. So pulling your brush off towards the bottom, that's where the paint will collect, and you can draw the paint off there at the bottom. That's the same with any sort of shading, so taking your brush down toward the bottom, moving it off. The same on this side. And you can go over this as many times as you want. So I'm trying to go over it so you can really see the difference there on camera. And the same underneath the knee pad there where the shading would be. The light's hitting from above. In this case, a bit more under that foot there. This is nice to do because it gives the red some depth. Like I say, if you're just going to paint some squads, you probably wouldn't do this stage. You've just line in the panels like you normally would. Just glazing it down. So hopefully you can see what we're doing there. And I do that over the whole of the armour. Obviously I'm being lazy again and just painting a leg, but I've got lots of nice Space Marine legs now. Quite a collection. Just glazing it down. I think you get the idea now, so just keep going over as much as you want. I'll come back in a second and show you this when it's dry. Okay, so we've got our first subtle shade there on the red. So that was corn red, thinned. You could probably just pick it up. I think the camera's making it quite harsh. So what I'll do is I'll take a photo at the end as I usually do, just to show you guys. So we're going to shade a little bit more now, get a little bit darker. So in the past, shading red, I've done a few different things. I sometimes just add black into the corn red just to go, okay, I want to make it darker, here we go. But if I'm painting something of a higher level or something that I want to take a bit more time over, the colour that I've found that works really well, believe it or not, is Incubi Darkness. And this is fantastic because shading colours, if you shade with the opposite colour, it works very well. And Incubi Darkness is a very dark green colour. So if you mix that in with red, it gives you a natural shade. And it's great for shading red. So if you can just mix black in if you want for this stage, that's fine. I'm mixing Incubi Darkness in with corn red, just to show you guys what it can do, and it gives a very natural shade, and it makes that red retain its colour as well. So I'm getting that on the palette, making that into that wash consistency we had before. So this is what we got going on now. You can see it's darker, but it's still keeping that colour. If you mix black in, it loses its colour. So it still gives you like the same sort of finish, but we're going to go for something of a higher quality. We'll show you guys that, and it's a nice trick as well. Talk to other figure painters about using opposite colours to shade colours, and it gives you a nice natural shade. So first thing we're just going to drop it into the darkest recesses because we know it's going to go in there. When I say drop it in, it's terminology we use because the paint is very thin on the brush. It will literally just run into the recesses for you. You don't have to really do much work because the paint's so thin. So this is the first thing I'm going to do. So you can already see there it's darker. I'm going to go around all the panel lines and I'll come back in just a second. Okay, so that's the Corn Red and Inky by Darkness panel lining shade done. So we're just going to take the same mix and thin that down, making a glaze again, so wash consistency. And so you know how we glazed the Corn Red downwards, so we're going to do that, but a little bit further down this time. Being very considered with where you're placing this, drawing your brush off. So put less on to begin with and build it up. You can always add to it. If you put too much on, you can't take it away. So that's starting to dry now. We'll do the same down here. So take your time with it, let it dry, go over it again. Keep doing this. We're adding some depth to the panel lines now, to the armor plates now, sorry. Underneath the knee. And red is one of my favourite colours to paint, so I love this stage. It's just really like taking my time with it, getting some depth into the red. Just keep going over it as much as you want. You can make it as dark as you like. It's really up to you at this stage. This is your world. You can see that there's some shading going on now, and this red's becoming nice and rich. So if you do use this Inky by Darkness and Corn Red mix, and you're painting a lot of Blood Angels, just make a pot up, make a pot mix, and just use it across your entire army. That's what I would recommend doing. So you see here, just glazing it down, drawing your brush off the bottom. Just keep doing that. If you draw your brush off the bottom, it stops those tide marks and the pooling that you get. There we go. You can see that. So I'm just going to finish this stage. And I think we'll do one final stage of shading before we continue. Okay, so that was the Inky by Darkness and Corn Red mix. It's glazed down. You can see there's some depth going on there. I'm going to do one more shading. So I'm just going to heavily thin down some black. So I think some of those very strong panel lines could just do with black in there. So this is just thin down black paint into a wash consistency. See that? Just being very careful, placing that into the very deepest panel lines now. So I don't want to cover up all of that shading we've done. Just really making some of those strong panel lines very dark as they should be. Just behind the knee. So you get the idea now, so just in the darkest areas. Underneath the greave, the shin plate. And in these grooves as well in there. We'll go on the foot plate. I'm just going to finish this stage and then we're going to start doing some highlights. Okay, so that's all our shading complete now. So now I'm just going to start layering up some highlights. So I'm going to use Evil Sun Scarlet, which is a really strong punchy red. I'm going to thin that down on my palette. About 50-50 water to paint. And just to show you there, quite a thin consistency. And I'm going to start basically putting that where I want the highlights to be. So glazing it on. So we don't want thick, chunky paint. We want nice, thin paint. And we're going to build up these layers. So glazing up now. So rather than pulling the brush down, we're going upwards towards the end of the panels so the paint doesn't pull. Doing the same here. This is a good example. So take your brush up, draw it off, and if you get like a blob of paint, just use the end of your brush to take it away. And we've done the kneecap, the knee there, that's dry, so we can go back over that. See, just taking my brush towards the centre. So we're not working the edges just yet, we're really just working the surface areas where the light would be most prominent. So there's a nice blend going on with that red. So top of the foot. This bit's dry, so we'll go back over this to make it a bit stronger, drawing your brush upwards. We'll do it all the way around the greave towards the top. You've got to be careful now you don't get your paint in the panel line. So keeping it thin and accurate. So we're starting to blend that colour up now. So we got a nice rich red. So you'll notice what I do is I go over an area, go to another area and then go back to that area again once that paint's dry. So I'm working the whole surface really at the same time, rather than trying to finish one area and then moving on to the next. That'll help keep consistency across the model as well. So you'll see how thin the paint is on here. So hopefully you can start to see that red being worked up now. So I'm going to do this stage and then we'll come back in a minute. Okay, so we've done the blending stage now with the Evilson Scarlet. So I'm just going to take some Evilson Scarlet again, maybe thin that down, not quite as thin as what we had before. And then I'm just going to go and pick out the edges of the panel lines now with that same colour. So where you can, use the edge of your brush. It's going to make those armour panels really pop out now. So just show you. So using the edge of your brush here. Just like so. So you can use the edge of your brush on these areas, but because you can't do that on the top of the knee, for example, you're going to have to go in with the tip of your brush, try and be neat. Just like so. So if you can use the edge of your brush, use it. It's a lot easier. So I'm going to go around these edges. It's very boring to watch, and then we'll come back in a minute. Okay, so I've just gone around all of the edges with the Evilson Scarlet now. Sometimes you'll see on some Space Marines on the rounded areas, like these knee pads, you'll see some painters put orbs of light. We'll add one on here just to show you guys how we're going to do it. So this is using the Evilson Scarlet. So painting in that area, just drawing the brush towards the middle, release the brush, and you let that dry. And you go over it again, basically. And you do this on the rounded shapes. So you can do it down here. Release your brush into the center. And you can do it on the shoulder pads as well. There'll probably be one about there. We've done these on the other Space Marine videos as well. I think sometimes Blood Angels look nice with them. It's really up to you. We'll do one here just to show you guys how to do it. If you want to try it, you can. You don't have to. It depends if you want to give the impression that the armour's slightly shiny or not. What kind of finish you want. We'll pop on here anyway. Cool. So now we're going to go on to the next stage. That's another highlight now. So it's Wild Rider Red. Thinning that down on the palette with water, making that wash consistency again. So the first stage for this highlight is we're going to be doing glazing those blended highlights on before we do the same thing and go for the edge highlights. So making sure that that's a nice thin consistency there. Yep, we're ready. We'll do the same thing. So we're blending upwards. We're going a little bit further up than what we went with the previous highlight, which was Evil Sun Scarlet. So this is Wild Rider Red towards the top of those panels a little bit more now. Blending upwards. We don't want too much of this. This is slightly orange. We don't want to destroy the red that we've got going on now. So the problem with red is it can be over highlighted very easily and you lose the redness basically. So it can end up being quite orange or quite pink depending on what you're highlighting with. So this recipe we're using today is my go-to recipe for red. I use it for quite a lot of things. Sometimes I'll change it depending on what I'm using. But yeah. So just blending up there on the knee pad. See if I can show you guys a better angle. Glazing to start with. Getting those transitions on. Working within the highlights that we've just placed. Same on the boots. Keeping it thin, just glazing it over. Working up the surfaces first. So I'll do this and then we'll go on to the edge highlights. Okay, so we've blended up slightly there with the leg. So we're just going to do the edge highlight now. So that's with Wild Rider again. Just thinning that, be about 50-50 and just going around those edges again. We're going to do a thinner highlight around the edges than what we did previously. Just focusing on the top surfaces now, those top lines. So we don't need to go around all of them. We're getting lighter. You can see I'm just going to go around those edges. Describing the shape of the panel lines. That Wild Rider Red. We didn't blend up too much over the red, so like I said, we'll lose the colour that we want. We want these to look like red Space Marines, not orange. And like I said previously, if you've got an edge and you can use the flat of your brush, it's going to make your life a lot easier. Like those surfaces there. So I'm going to go around these panel lines and then we'll carry on. Okay, so we've gone around all those edges now with the Wild Rider Red. And now we're going to do another highlight of Troll Slayer Orange now. So doing exactly the same as what we did before. First thing we're going to do is going to heavily thin it down into a wash consistency. So that we can first just glaze on a few highlights just in those areas where we did before. Just focusing towards the very tops now. Hardly any pigment in this now, so just glazing over. It's getting a nice transition. Just working over those surfaces really quickly. So just go for the very top areas. Don't let the paint pool too much. Once it's dry, go back over again. And at this same stage, you can do those orbs that we're talking about on the knees, on the rounded areas. Just a small amount of paint in there, draw it off into the middle, and let that dry. And just keep going around those surfaces with this first glazing of the highlight stage. You can see that highlighting is in two stages, so it's glaze over those large surfaces and then it's edge highlight. It's the sort of thing I like to do. You kind of dance around the different parts of the model, just doing this glazing stage over those areas until you're happy with the highlights you've got going on. So hopefully there you go, you've got a good shot there. You can see what we're doing. There we go. So I'm going to do this, and then we'll do some edge highlighting. Okay, so the glazing's done. Don't glaze up too much, guys. You'll lose the strength of the red. We want to retain that. We want it to be nice and punchy. So now it's just doing the same thing, thinning down that false layer orange, just hitting those edges. We're leaving some of those previous highlights showing now, so we're just focusing on those top areas. So very tops. Don't need to go all the way down to the bottom. That's where the light's going to be stronger. So the tops of the knee pads there is where you're required to be quite accurate. The edge highlighting stage. So here we're going through that now. Let's go along those edges with your Trolso orange. So you've seen this before now, so I'm going to go around and finish this stage and then we'll come back. Okay, so that's the Trolso orange edge stage done. So you can see we've still got a nice strong red there, and we're just picking out those edges more than anything else. So the last highlight stage I'm going to do here is Luganath orange, and this is a really great colour for highlighting red. It's very pale, so you don't need a lot of it. So I'm just going to thin this down. So this is neither very orange, even though it's called Luganath orange. It's not too orange and it's not too pink. It's just in between, which is perfect for that last highlight. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around these edges, if the camera can focus in for you, and just pick out the very corners, the very top edges with a very small amount. So we don't need a lot. Be very careful with this now. Just edging now, not blending, just edge highlighting. So just picking out those sharpest areas. And the areas where the light would hit the top. So I'm going to go around these armor panels now and I'll show you that finished result in a second. Okay, so that's Luganath orange finished now. You can see I've just picked out those edges, not too much, still keeping that red nice and strong. Now at this stage you could say, okay, that's my armor done, and you could leave it. So what we could try now is just have a bit of fun. Is I'm just going to add a dot highlight on those corners with some Screaming Skull. So I'm just going to thin that down. Now this is even less than the Luganath orange, so it's very, very small amount. So when I say a dot highlight, I mean so just picking out those very corners and very central areas that we've highlighted. So just in there, just there. So you can see I'm just putting a dot. This is something I just want to try, because when you paint red you can desaturate it quite a lot. At this stage we can have a bit of fun with it. So you can see the dots just going on now. Just on the corners. Don't overdo the stage. If you do, it can really mess up everything you've done. It's in the a lot of people like doing these dot highlights on Space Marines now, but if you overdo it, it's hard to focus on the model. So just a few, think about where they're going to be. Probably just going to add tiny dot inside those orbs that we spoke about earlier. I'm messing this one up. There we go. We'll just take it off with a brush. Cool. Okay, cool. And we'll go on to the next stage in a second. Okay, so this last stage we're going to try. So this is something that I always like to do at the end of painting armor panels sometimes. This is the glazing stage. So you can see we've got the red here. It's still quite strong, still looks red, but we can try and make this even stronger if you want to, and you can use that. You can use a glaze to do that. Now the contrast paints are perfect for making glazes. So all we need to do is just pick what glaze you want, what color you want, and then add contrast medium or lamian medium. It doesn't matter. I'm going to use contrast medium today because the last time I used lamian medium, a lot of people asked in the comments why I didn't use contrast medium, so we'll use that today. So there's two red contrast paints. So we've got a darker, more intense red, Flesh Tearers red here, and this one is actually Blood Angels red. We're not going to use Blood Angels red. We're going to use the Flesh Tearers red because it's a little bit darker and it's a little bit more saturated with red. Blood Angels red is slightly more orange in colour. So I'm going to mix that on the palette with the contrast medium. I'm going to add a touch of water as well just to help it flow. It's not going to change the qualities of it too much. So I'll just show you, it's very much like an ink. And we're going to see if we can make this red even stronger. And this is why we did the extra highlight, that dot highlight now, because when we place this over, it should pull those highlights back down together. So we're just going to move the brush really quickly over the surface, not letting that glaze, because we've created a glaze now, not letting it pull. And we're just going to go over the whole area. Moving the brush fast, getting an even finish over that whole area. As simple as that. And we'll let that dry and we'll come back in a second. Okay, so that glaze is done now. So that was Flesh Tearers red with contrast medium. Just one coat over there. What it's done is it's pulled all those layers together as well, giving it one even finish and just made that red a little bit more intense, a little bit punchy. And doesn't it look delicious? It looks great. There we go. So what I'll do is I'll take a photo of this and we'll do a quick recap as we normally do. And then you guys can give it a go. Like I said earlier, if you're going to do any squads or you're going to do some batch paintings, you want to simplify this. So I'd just do Mephiston red base coat, do probably one shade of the Incubi and Corn red mix, and then do Wild Rider highlight, and the Troll Slayer highlight, and then the Luganeth highlight. So I'll probably still stick with 3 highlights, but just the one shade there for the Corn red mix. You know, basically using the same palette, but just skipping out a couple of stages, and you'll get a similar finish. And you can save this sort of thing for characters or work it up a little bit more if you like. But yeah, there you go. You can see that there, and we'll take a photograph now so you can see in a picture the final result. Okay guys, so there's a photograph of the finished leg now, so you can see all of the transitions and the intensity of the red that we did, and those extra highlights, and then the glazing at the end that's really pulled it all together. So that's something that was worth doing as well. So give it a go on your Blood Angels or any red space marines you like, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye guys, bye.